Hey everyone, I'm Aaliyah,
I'm Curtis.
and this is Heavy Business. And we have Kragen back on today. Thanks so much for coming back on the podcast, Kragen.
You're welcome. Thanks
Um,
for having me again.
of course, Kragen is a project manager at Nuclear Blast and guitarist in Heathen and many other hats as well. So um,
Although no hat today.
today, no hats today. Well, I'm wearing a hat.
Yeah,
I
you got a
was
hat today.
I got the hat on. Um,
Perfect.
so we wanted to start with actually rewinding a few years and talking a little bit about what you used to do with Activision.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I joined Activision in 1999. I started there as a tester. They had an open position there, and at the time you applied and you spent part of your time testing games and part of your time in the customer service department or customer support, answering phone calls and stuff like that. So that's where I started. I was basically at home. I was playing a game, and I found a bug in the game and watched my character die 100 times in a row, and got frustrated and looked on their website to see if there was any kind of like information. And I don't know what made me click on careers, but I'm glad it did because I had a long career there. And I saw the job opening, and I'm like, well, obviously they need help testing because I just found a problem in their game that's out. Um, so I basically just started as a tester, and answering customer service calls, and I kind of just worked my way up there. Actually, in both departments, I worked my way up, and then they chose for me to stay in the what they call the QA department, quality assurance, which is the testing department. And I became a lead, and I led a team of testers to work on a few different video games. I worked on the very first Spider-Man game for the PlayStation, and Toy Story 2 and a bunch of other games that were back during the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast and stuff like that. So we worked on all that stuff. I was doing that probably for uh, a couple years, and then I became a senior lead, which was essentially the same job, except I was managing other leads and bigger projects. I worked on the Spider-Man the movie game, which was the first video game that was shipped worldwide in all territories at the same time. Uh, and that was an interesting project, working on a game based on a movie, because the film studio wanted us to keep it all under wraps so nobody would know what the movie was about. So we had a locked room that you had to have key card access to go in and test. And it was like, I mean, in the size of the room I'm in, probably lined with 30 people testing. I mean, it was crazy. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I essentially got an opportunity to move from the basement where we were testing upstairs to the production department. And I became an associate producer and then a producer, and worked on video games like Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and a 007 game and a few other things. So it was a
That
very interesting career. I spent 12 years there working, and worked on a lot of video games during that time.
yeah, and a lot of big names that like are well loved. So
Yeah, I made a mistake, and I who could have known at the time. I was given a choice. My boss at the time said, "Look, you can work on Guitar Hero 3, or you can work on 007." And my thought was, okay, well, it's James Bond, and this Guitar Hero thing's a fad. I'm not going to work on that. I'll take the 007. So the 007 game turned out to be a complete pain in the ass to work on. We remade the game like twice, whereas Guitar Hero 3 was the biggest video game of all time for a long time.
yep.
So yeah, you never know when you get a choice like that. But I did
Well,
work on a
sometimes you
couple
just
of
got
the
to
other
do what
Guitar
you
Hero.
love.
Well, yeah. I mean, I obviously I'm a guitar player. I didn't
It's true.
I didn't connect with Guitar Hero because
Fair.
it's
Because
a
you like to play the real guitar.
yeah, well, yeah, and it's not anything like playing the real guitar. So I was terrible at it.
It's
It was
not, I
just a
know.
rhythm game. It was like drummers are really good at Guitar Hero. But I, wasn't really my thing. So I chose, as they said in one of the Indiana Jones movies, I chose poorly.
Well, you still worked on some of the other Guitar Hero games, like you said, right?
I did, yeah. I actually worked on a couple right after that, and they were great. They were great games. The 007 game turned out to be a good game too, but making it was incredibly difficult. So,
What was so difficult about it, if you don't mind me asking?
well, so it was originally supposed to come out with the first um what's the actor's name? Daniel Craig?
Daniel Craig. Yeah,
Yeah, it was supposed to come out with the
Daniel
first
Craig.
movie, Casino Royale, that he was in. And so we had built this game. Our developer that it's called Treyarch. They make Call of Duty now. Um, they were making the game, and they had designed it around the Casino Royale script. But the game turned out to not kind of come together very well. The game mechanics, and it was just clunky. It wasn't fun, and they essentially uh, put it on the back burner and kind of reworked the whole game engine, and then included some of the storyline from the next movie, Quantum of Solace, and called it the Quantum of Solace game. So you had half the levels were about Casino Royale, and half of them were Quantum of Solace, and it was just it was difficult. I had a difficult relationship with the producer at the developer, and it was complicated just to kind of get that one out the door. It didn't go smoothly or easily. Like the Guitar Hero games, the developer that made those, Neversoft, was fantastic, and I had a great relationship with them, so it was very easy to work with them. I didn't have to bother them for anything. They were on autopilot all the time. And plus that was an established thing already by the time I was working on it, whereas this James Bond game was the first one that we were making for Activision, and there was kind of a lot riding on it. So um, it was challenging, but that's okay. That's part of making any creative project.
Exactly. Any creative project. So let's move on to talking about something music related. But I
Okay.
mean, this is still kind of, you know, in that I want to know, what do you think you learned at Activision that still applied to your job at Nuclear Blast?
A lot, actually. So the producer job at Activision was more or less a project manager position. The only difference is that when you're a producer in the video game industry, you're responsible for $100 million video game and not a album that somebody else is ultimately responsible for making. I'm I have less responsibility in that regard at Nuclear Blast, um, but there are a lot of things uh, that I think all are connected. So things that I learned while I was at Activision, I learned to read contracts. I learned to understand all the legalese and know what different things meant. A lot of that stuff is very similar to like a record deal. Um, Contractually, there's an investment, there's a percentage that the artist gets. There are different clauses for rights and things like that. All of it is very similar. Um, the other thing that I think was really interesting, working on like Guitar Hero or Tony Hawk game, for example, we would license a lot of music to put into the games. And I would get to those licenses for the songs that we were licensing and see what rights we had, what rights we didn't. and understanding that whole licensing process. For video games, the way that they do it, it's not like television or film. They're so all of these different mediums, royalties only get paid on film and television. Movies, unless you have some kind of clause in your deal, it's a one-time license where they pay you a flat amount of money up front, and then they get to use your song in the movie forever. Whereas film and TV, if you get a song licensed into a TV show, every time it airs, you get money. So it's a different type of thing. And video games are more like a film. So it was a flat amount of money that was paid to these artists, and you get to use it in the video game for the life of the video game.
Do you have any insight into how music gets selected for video games?
Yeah, I mean, at Activision, we had a film licensing duo when I worked there. Two people that worked in the music licensing. Usually, they had connections at all of the different labels that would send them music to listen to. They would go through it and see what was appropriate. Sometimes the software developers would say, hey, I really want to use this song. And if it was possible, we would look into it. Sometimes, somebody like me would say, I would like to have this song in the game. It didn't always happen, but sometimes we could select things that way. The further I got in my career, the more corporate Activision became. A lot of the stuff was more about popularity of the artists than it was about music fitting a game. So, for example, I remember a meeting I was in where we were talking about the cover art for one of these Guitar Hero games, and somebody in the music licensing department says, well, we should put Kurt Cobain on the cover. And I said in the meeting, I was like, he's not a guitar hero. He's a songwriting hero.
Yeah.
But he's not a guitar hero.
True.
And ultimately, that's not the view I have is skewed because A, I'm a guitar player, and B, I'm a music fan. And I know what a guitar hero is, the definition of it. Their definition of it was more or less like, yeah, but if we put this popular person on the cover, it'll sell. So there was some of that as well that we had to kind of get through. We didn't put Kurt Cobain on the cover, but
right.
But I wasn't also validated as being correct, so
Boo.
that's
well,
okay.
You were right.
Yeah, but I mean, if you put Yngwie Malmsteen on the cover of Guitar
Who
Hero,
knows who that is, right?
Yeah, I mean,
you have to find that balance of somebody that fits the description of Guitar Hero and also pop culture icon that everybody's going to know, which is kind of hard.
Arguably, Yngwie Malmsteen changed guitar forever and will never be recognized for it because he never had a hit song. But Kurt Cobain had many hit songs, so that's there. Anyway, we had a lot of that kind of stuff. Being a musician and seeing the corporate sort of view of things, sales and marketing view of things versus, what is, I don't know, just defined in my mind a certain way. It was interesting to see that difference.
Did you find that caused any kind of existential crisis for you? Like, for me, it did when I started realizing it.
No, I mean, it wasn't really that. I think the corporate mentality bothered me more than that kind of stuff. When I started there, it was as we used to describe it, a fighty, scrappy group of people that would do whatever it took to get the game made. I mean, I remember making a couple of action sports games, and I was an associate producer at the time we had a voiceover booth in the building. And I would go in there and I would record Kelly Slater or some other, or Tony Hawk or one of these people that was, we were making a game based off of, and record their voiceovers right there in the building. And it was really because we just didn't have a budget to go outside and do something else, So I enjoyed that part of it a little bit more, that sort of DIY, let's get it done attitude, more than the, hey, we have $100 million and, let's hire out to this fancy company to make an intro for the, So
Do you feel like that kind of corporate mindset exists as well at the record label or in the record label industry in general?
sure. I mean, not so much at metal labels, but
Okay, fair.
if you were to, go to Warner Brothers or some bigger label, they're, someone my age is too old. They won't come right out and say it because it's not legal to do that, but they also don't find new artists that are older, talented people. They're looking for young people that are beautiful. And if they happen to have talent, that's great. The talent can be manipulated with technology these days. So that to me is more of a corporate, like, hey, we're selling this to you. It's not, hey, this is a really great song. But I mean, you think about this, like I just watched the Dio documentary last night, which was great. For a guy that was in his 30s to have a solo career and have a record deal on Warner Brothers, to not be all that attractive. He was short. He just had an amazing voice. And the talent was the most important thing there. That has gone away, I think, in modern day. I don't see as much of that. You don't see that. You see a lot of pretty people that can sing and dance, and that's about it,
Yeah, and then like every once in a while they'll find a Susan Boyle to like
Yes.
kind of convince you that it's not happening, but it is
Right.
mostly like
Right. But where
99% of
is
the
she
time.
now?
Right.
Yeah. But yes, I mean, I think that exists. I think it exists in all areas of any kind of business has that. They're trying to sell you something, and it's all about the marketing and the image of it and playing on people's feelings. And, that's the world we live in. So, and I understand that. It doesn't deter me from wanting to make music. That's just an impulse. I can't control wanting to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
guess it might just affect people's expectations of where that music could take them.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. I know I'm only going to get so far doing it. That's okay to me as long as I have the outlet. Some people get frustrated by that and they just bail out of the business altogether. It's the whole business is a constant uphill battle. There's not any easy moments where you sit back and say, wow, we finally made it to the top. It's just like the AC/DC song says, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And even when you get there, you're not going to be there for very long. So enjoy it for a second. And then hopefully you treated the people that you saw on the way up well, because you're going to see them on the way back down. So.
Very true. Kind of rolling back to, you mentioned that DIY aspect of recording people and like their voiceovers and things like that. And I know that you also have a home recording setup where you record your demos and your demo vocals sometimes, and like the guitars and stuff for Heathen, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I used to use the same setup after Activision. I was a voiceover editor for a couple different companies that made video games. Like I worked on the Elder Scrolls Online game, editing every single line of voiceover. And I actually had a team that worked with me on that that I found. It was a freelance job, and I did it all at home on my recording setup, and I learned how to edit really well. And I'm actually thankful for that job opportunity because I needed a little bit of money, and it also gave me some really good experience that I've been able to use with the, with music stuff too. So I have a setup here at home. I record all the guitar tracks for the Heathen albums here, for the last one and the new one. And I demo the vocals or do whatever I need to do to kind of get the songs so that they're ready to go into the studio. I do things a little backwards. I'll, program drums, or Jason, our bass player, will program drums, and I'll record the final guitar tracks to it, and then we do the rest of the recording around the guitars. It's a way for me to speed things up so that by the time we get the drum tracks done, we're halfway done already. It also allows me the opportunity to go in and kind of make changes or tweak things in the songs, either melodies or maybe change some notes in a riff to work with the vocals or whatever it might be. I love being able to be creative in here. It's great. So yeah, it's cool to have the setup. I never recorded voiceovers at home. I just edited them, but I did get to record some, when I was at Activision at different places. So
Any pro tips for people wanting to record their guitars at home?
I don't know. The way I do it these days, I use my Kemper, which is a digital amplifier, and I record into the recording software, and I essentially don't touch anything in terms of like changing the sound or anything. And I can record things and then maybe even go back, months later, and say, I don't like this little piece, I'm going to change it. Or I might come up with some melody that I really like for the vocals, and then there's part of a rhythm that doesn't fit or line up or whatever. I can go back and change all that stuff. I love being able to do that and have the ability to do that. And it still sounds, it's actually, I found this guy in Australia that I sent a recording of my Mesa Boogie amp to, and he made a profile, and you can't even tell the difference between the two amps, So it's great. It's a great tool for me to be able to be creative and change things whenever I feel like it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hold on. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of other things that I would say, for tips and tricks, learn how to edit. I hear a lot of metal albums that are more DIY, that to me, not enough attention is put into what I would call post-production. So there's the recording part of it, right, where you can record yourself. And then there's the part where you're listening to everything and saying, oh, there's a noise here on this side, or during a stop, it's not silent. Like even small things like that can make a huge difference in the quality level of what you're listening to. And editing in itself is an art form. It's, this is going to sound really nerdy, but you have to become one with the wave file. You have to be able to look at it and understand, okay, this is where I'm doing this. This is the percussive part of the hit, or whatever it might be. It's easier to edit vocals because you can see each word. It's a little blob, right? But guitars, when you're playing a whole part, it's a little more difficult to see where is he actually hitting this note or what. But to me, that's one of the things where, to really have it sound as tight as possible. And then also on top of that, I would say you kind of have to keep up with the Joneses. There's this whole retro vibe, especially with thrash metal, where everybody wants it to sound raw. To me, it just sounds like a demo. It doesn't sound good. If you want to sound like even Metallica from 1986, it doesn't sound raw like that. Their stuff sounds tight, and it's, they probably did every trick in the book. They probably edited stuff back then, except what they used to do is they would take the tape reel and they would cut it with the razor blade, and they would take another tape and put a piece of tape on the back of it and run it through and transfer it to another tape, and that was how they edited. So they still did it. At least the high-end productions did.
Yeah, but I do think that like back then people were just better musicians. They had to be.
That's absolutely true. And when I say you should learn how to edit, that doesn't mean you shouldn't practice. You have to be good enough to record it in the first place. The editing is like enhancement of what's there. It's to take it from your best abilities to what it sounds like in your head. That's how I see it. I don't look at one as a substitute for the other. And there are a lot of people that use it as a substitute where they can't play at all, but they can make it sound like they can play.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of when you get those compositions that you're like, wow, this is a really good composition, but something's missing, that's the
Yeah,
soul or something,
it still has to have feel. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to move on to talking a little bit more. You mentioned on our last episode, you do have your own indie label where you help some artists to release some stuff.
Yep.
And I wanted to inquire a little bit more about the functionality behind all of that and what can an indie label do for artists that they can't really do for themselves?
Well, so what I have is what most people would refer to as a bedroom label. I don't
Sure.
have distribution. I do it all myself. It's how I would describe it is I would do it like the old days where we tape traded and did stuff like that. I do have, a MailChimp, that I keep from my store, and I send out newsletters and update people when I have new products. I look at it more as uh, a conduit for me to be able to either do projects that I want to do, like make guitar books, or help bands put out a CD that they either don't have the ability to themselves financially or otherwise, and give it a pro look. When I make a product, I want it to look like a product that Nuclear Blast would make or some other label would make. Meaning like the artwork has to be good. Everything about the packaging looks good. You don't have Arial size 12 as your font on the back. There are a lot of things where I still see that and I'm like, oh, come on, man. There are graphic artists who could design something for you and charge you $100 and it would look much better than what you got there. So all of that stuff matters. If I'm going to make a product, I want it to look great. So I just in terms of what it can do for a band that they can't do themselves, I would say the first thing is some bands and band members are just creative brain only. They don't have the interest or capability to kind of compile all the assets and get something made that looks awesome. I would say there are a few artists that are good at doing that kind of stuff, some of which I work with, thankfully. But I would say a lot of times artists want to focus on the art, and they don't want to focus on menial tasks like proofreading lyrics in a booklet. So things like that, I think are helpful. Sometimes it's just finances. Sometimes it's just presentation. If a band if they don't want to self-release it. Um, or if you want it to look like it's more than a self-release, doing it, through a label is helpful. I've just kind of always liked to do this stuff. I mean, when I was 21, we put out the first Psychosis CD. That was in '92, and we were one of the first local bands to even have a CD. And we went all out. Like, we went to A&M Records to have it mastered, and we found a graphic artist to do the artwork to make it look professional. And ever since then, that's kind of been something that I've just enjoyed doing. I like doing that kind of stuff. I'm used to proofreading booklets and uh, compiling things for other people to kind of make whatever part of the project needs to be done. So
I have a question on this. So how many bands have you released in total?
Honestly, most of it's my stuff. I have released, I did the Invicta CD, the most recent one. I did a release for a band called Artisan. And I have another one that's supposed to come up, a band called Vicious Circle. They put out an album 30 years ago now that is out of print, and it's really good. The original artwork was not very good, and so we had new artwork made, and I have that basically ready to go. I just have to finish the mastering on the songs. But
Cool.
I've helped. I do a lot of stuff digitally also to help bands get their stuff out there. Um, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have to look at it and say, um, as a business venture, I can't see myself selling enough to recoup if I make CDs. And if I can't do that, but I still want to help the band, I'll help them get it out digitally so that it's out everywhere and it's done properly. And I do have like a YouTube channel that I'll put up their videos. And so, just that kind of stuff, just trying to help bands that need it, a little help sometimes to get things going. And sometimes I help them get a deal afterwards. So
Can you kind of define, because you just brought it up, what would you call a proper digital release then? Because most people just put up on Bandcamp and that's it, right?
yeah, I mean, there's so that's probably the most common way because it's just easy. When I say a proper release, I'll put it up on Bandcamp, but I also will make sure that the Bandcamp page looks good. That
He
it's done through my label Bandcamp so that people can kind of spider web to other bands to check out. There's also, the most important thing is the digital release to get it on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon and everywhere else. And I set that up and make sure that it's done properly so that everything's spelled right, and the songwriters get credit. If I do a digital release, I help the bands get their publishing set up so that they can collect their pennies for the streams. All that kind of stuff.
cool.
I think most labels wouldn't go that far with the publishing. But for me, if I'm going to help people, I want to help them understand the business a little bit and hopefully be able to collect some royalties on it. So
Makes sense. Lee, are we almost out of time, or do I have time to discuss one more point?
We are almost out of time, but you can go right ahead with one more question.
Well, we should probably discuss this because Kragen kind of brought it up. No one's talked about the elephant in the room, which is Bandcamp possibly dying. What are your thoughts on that?
were they bought out recently? What was
Yeah,
it?
well, they laid off a bunch of people. They were bought out once, and then they got bought out again, apparently, and now they laid off 50% of their staff. Half the people in the world are like, everything's dying. So
I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, Bandcamp is good for Bandcamp is good for smaller bands, but most people that go and they buy music or they stream music, they're not doing it on Bandcamp.
And if they are, they're not getting any fucking money when the bands aren't getting fucking money. I hate that. Drives me
Yes,
nuts.
that's right.
I
So
hate that.
Bandcamp is the only platform where you can go and stream music where they do not report, so that bands they can't get any pennies for the streams.
I hate
They
that.
they only get money when they sell something.
But you can set up your album so that people can listen to it a limited number of times
Yes, you
before
can.
purchasing.
But
You
there's so many
can.
people that go, I will only stream on Bandcamp because Spotify doesn't pay much. And then it's like, you fucking idiot. They don't pay anything. Sorry.
They don't. They pay nothing.
Well, good point.
Yeah,
It's stupid.
and then on top of it, they also take 15% off the top every time somebody buys something. So you're losing 15% plus probably another 3% for PayPal, because that's how they do it. So you're immediately losing like 20% of your money. And then on top of it, if people stream, let's say you set it up where people can only stream it 3 times before they have to buy it. You're losing those 3 streams. You're not getting any, you're not getting 3/16 of a penny. But ultimately, it's one of those things where I think I think the platform is limited anyway. It's good for demo bands, and I mean, Nuclear Blast has a page there. We sell stuff on Bandcamp because it's another avenue to get people to buy products.
Yep.
And I think it's in that way. I think it's good. I think people can go and search and kind of.
It's kind of like a community-based social media, almost a different social media forum.
Find different bands here and there. You guys were all frozen. Am I back?
We lost you, yeah, for a second there. I was just saying that it's like a social media platform almost in its own way. Kind of has a community aspect to it.
I don't know. I don't see it much different than like SoundCloud, really. The only difference is that it's more organized, and you can, change the background of the page and make it look like, like it fits your artwork or whatever. But ultimately, it's not really that much different, other than you can buy the stuff there. If it were to go away, I mean, I think it would be a bummer for some bands that rely on Bandcamp for their listeners. But in the end, Spotify just announced the first profit ever for their company, and they are by far the #1 streaming service. So I don't know. I mean, labels are not focused on Bandcamp. The major labels wouldn't touch Bandcamp because there's no streaming in it where they get paid. So they wouldn't touch it at all. Everybody in the major label world would focus on Spotify. And I would say most of the metal labels are probably focusing on Spotify plus physical product. So even if they did have a Bandcamp page, I don't think they would cry too much if it went away.
I don't think it's that big of a deal, personally.
I think some bands would be bummed out, but there'll just be another similar thing to take its place.
Agreed. Well, I think that is a good place to close things off. Thank you so much again for coming back on the podcast, Kragen. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Like I said, I like doing things like this where you guys have good questions that are interesting to talk about. And I think things that maybe other podcasts don't cover. So it's a really cool thing for me. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Kragen.
Yeah.
And everyone listening, thanks for listening. And until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.